Hello, Schoonback crew. We're going to continue our reading of Who Was Abraham Lincoln by Janet Pascal. I would like you to listen to answer the following questions. Why was the Gettysburg Address so famous? What did it accomplish? How did it make President Lincoln famous? And how was Thanksgiving first developed by the country as a national holiday? So here we go. As the war neared the end of the second year, more than 100 battles had been fought, with many thousands of men wounded and killed, and still neither side was winning. In the North, it became harder and harder to find men who were willing to join the army, and the government was running out of money to pay for the war. The South had broken away to keep slavery, yet so far Lincoln had avoided dealing with slavery directly. Now he realized he had to face the issue. Abolitionists supported the war because they thought it would end slavery. They wanted Lincoln to make it illegal once and for all. But even in the North, a lot of people were against this idea. Lincoln was afraid to lose their support, so he hesitated. What does hesitate mean? You're right, he waited. He wasn't sure that the president had the power to outlaw slavery. He had sworn to protect the law of the United States, and slavery in the South was legal. The president couldn't just overturn laws all by himself. That had to come from the people. Only the citizens of the country could change the United States Constitution. At last, Lincoln came upon a way to do what he thought was right, and at the same time obey the Constitution. That's one way we know President Lincoln was very intelligent. A country at war was allowed to seize property and the enemy was using to fight the war. Southern states were using slave labor in many ways that helped the war effort. Lincoln decided this was good legal reason to take the slaves away from their owners in the rebel states. Congress began to pass laws that chipped away at slavery. Slaves who escaped from rebel owners or were captured by the Union Army would not be returned to their owners. They were free. See, Lincoln he's very smart and he's able to get rid of slavery slowly and in a legal way that supports the Constitution. So we'll continue to read to find out how he does it. Then Lincoln decided to go further. Quietly and all by himself, he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation did not free all slaves. It was an act of war, and it applied only to the Confederate States. In the rebel states, all slaves would be freed forever. But in Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, slavery remained legal because these states had stayed with the Union. Lincoln was sure that once the nation was reunited, it would be possible to end slavery in the whole country, but that had to be done by Congress. As president, he only had power to act against states that were rebelling. Of course, there was no way to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation until the Union had won the war. Just because the proclamation told Southerners to free their slaves, it didn't mean they would. Lincoln knew this. He said he felt like someone trying to make a law to change the behavior of a comet. But now he had made it clear that the Union planned to end slavery for good. When Lincoln talked to his cabinet, he told them he was not asking for their advice. He had made up his mind. The act took effect on January 1st, 1863. Slaves in the South heard the news. Right away, many of them escaped and went north. This reminds you of the story of Harriet Tubman. The Union Army began to form regiments of black soldiers. As free men, they would now fight against their former masters, and by the end of the war, almost 200,000 blacks had joined the Union Army. Chapter 8. Finally, Lincoln found a brilliant general to lead his army, Ulysses S. Grant. Grant was willing to fight. He had already won important victories such as the Battle of Vicksburg, which gave the Union control of the Mississippi River. But Grant realized that just winning battles was not enough to win the war. The important thing was to take away the South's ability to keep on fighting. To do this, the Union Army had to attack in many places at once. There's Ulysses S. Grant. They had to fight battles one right after another, and they needed to destroy railroads and factories that helped keep the Confederate Army going. Grant planned to wear out the South so that it would have to surrender. What does surrender mean? You're right, it means give up. But it would take time and it would cause many thousands more deaths. Lincoln relied on Grant more and more. After one terribly bloody battle, many people thought Grant should be fired. But I can't spare this man, Lincoln said. He fights. In the North, fewer men were willing to volunteer as soldiers, so in 1863, Lincoln called for a draft. What do you think a draft is? For the first time in American history, men were forced to enlist in the Army. In New York, there were draft riots. Men said they didn't see why they should die to free Black people. Many Northerners were so fed up with the war, they were even willing to just let the rebel states go. More and more people blamed Lincoln. He needed to explain why the war had to be fought to the bitter end. But back then, the president didn't often address the nation directly. Lincoln's chance came at the dedication of the ceremony in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Battle of Gettysburg had been a great victory. A great victory for the Union. Union soldiers had stopped the rebels from pushing their way north, but more than 3,000 Union soldiers and almost 5,000 Confederate soldiers had been killed, and a special cemetery was created to bury them all. The dedication of the cemetery took place on November 19, 1863. Even though Lincoln was the president, he was not the main speaker. That was Edward Everett, a man famous for long, fancy speeches. Everett talked for almost 2 hours, and Lincoln spoke for only 2 minutes. His words were simple and direct. He began by quoting a line from the Declaration of Independence: "All men are created equal." He reminded his audience that the United States was the first country founded on the idea of equality. In 1776, no one had known if such a country could work. Now people were wondering if it could last. Maybe it was about to fall apart. Lincoln could not give in to the rebel demands because the country had to survive. The Union was fighting to keep the United States united, but also to guarantee that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. According to some listeners, the end of Lincoln's speech was greeted with silence. People were too moved to even clap. Edward Everett wrote that Lincoln, in 2 minutes, had gotten to the heart of the subject better than his own entire long speech. History agrees with Everett. The Gettysburg Address is widely considered one of the most beautiful and important speeches ever written. But the war had gone on for almost 1,000 days, and there was still no end in sight. Thanksgiving. Ever since the Pilgrims, Americans have celebrated days of Thanksgiving, but until 1863, there was no one day of the year that people thought of as Thanksgiving Day. Sarah Josepha Hale, who wrote the nursery rhyme called Mary Had a Little Lamb, thought there should be, starting in 1827. She wrote to every president, urging them to establish one, but no one listened until Abraham Lincoln, after the victory at Gettysburg, he issued a proclamation setting aside the last Thursday of November as the day to give thanks for the survival of the nation. And that is the end of this video. I will be back again in a couple of days to read the rest of the story to you. I hope you're having a good day. Get out and enjoy the sunshine. Love you. Bye.